A lot of times the arrowheads will be just right there on the surface.
Yeah.
When I was walking one of the fields, it was, right there. And it's, if you know what you're looking for, they're unmistakable.
I went arrowhead hunting one time in Virginia. Like, I guess when they like turn the seasons over and they like till the fields out, and I'm like, this is crazy. Like, what am I doing? And I'm looking down for like an hour, 2 hours, and people are showing me shit they got, and I'm like, how do you even know that's it? And then I found one that was like perfect.
Yeah.
Like, you could not mistake that's what this was.
Yep.
And I was like, oh shit, now I get it.
And now you're holding something in your hand that potentially 5,000 years old. Yeah. Now I'm talking about a coin that's 200-300 years old, the founding of our country and so on. Native American artifacts, you could be holding something that maybe is 10,000 years old. That's still sitting there. That last time a human hand touched it was 10,000 years ago. That completely blows my mind.
Have you ever done a podcast before or anything like that?
I've done podcasts, but I've done them basically over the phone in a format where it was my voice was recorded, but it was never like live. Obviously, it doesn't bother me. Either way, it's interesting to get different perspectives, and I think it's better when you record the podcast the way you're doing it, because you get to see people's body languages, their expressions, and it's a little bit better.
Sure, definitely. Are you a fan of podcasts yourself? Like, you listen to?
Yeah.
Any favorites or?
I mean, who doesn't like Rogan's podcast? Yeah. It's amazing. Whoever thought that you would be able to get people in this day and age, in this generation, to pay attention for more than 15 seconds at something, and the long form seems to be really where it is. People have an ability to pay attention for a much longer period of time than I ever would have expected, especially the younger generation. So Rogan's is a favorite of mine, and I've listened to so many different ones: economics podcasts, history podcasts. Basically just filling out my own interests, but there's something for everyone out there.
There really is. And like the low barrier to entry. Like, if you're an interesting person, you've got something interesting to talk about, there's an audience for you.
It's a revolution. I think the podcasting world's a revolution because you're not getting your information from one source anymore. And there's people that normally wouldn't have gotten attention. Probably someone like me wouldn't have gotten any attention 30 years ago. And now I have the opportunity to talk to you, and then maybe hundreds of people hear what I have to say.
That's it. Yeah, it's true. And the whole thing too with Rogan, what's been wild is, I mean, obviously his story is just crazy, how he just kind of went the other way everybody else was going, like you're saying with the long format stuff. But the last election was wild, like it was basically influenced by podcasters,
Yeah, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think in a free country, the more voices you have, the better. And people, I think the general public are way more intelligent than anyone gives anyone credit for. And the more people that get a chance to speak about whatever topics they're interested in, the better, the better it is for everyone.
It's going to be interesting too, the next election too, like where the dollars and the time goes, like they saw how heavily influenced this last election was by podcast. Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see where those campaign dollars go, and like how people that are running, where they put their time and energy into.
Yeah, how more money comes into it, what's going to change.
I mean, podcasting is just a natural evolution of media, right? So you had print media, people got all their information from newspapers. If you look at old pictures, and I'm into history, so look at the old pictures of people on the subway. They're not scrolling phones, obviously, but they all have a newspaper.
Right.
So it was very concentrated in the print media. Then obviously you have television and the internet, and now you have podcasting. Who knows where it goes next? What I don't like is on social media, the attention span, as I was mentioning before. I don't like that. There are times I've posted things and people have complained that they had to wait 8 seconds to see what I posted.
Oh, like the upfront hook part of it?
Yeah,
that's the game.
You have a very brief window to capture people's attention now. So that's one of the things I really like about podcasting, because it shows that there's a population of people that don't need to achieve something in the first 3 seconds to keep their attention. They're willing to listen for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours in the case of Rogan. So it's great. Podcasting's a great thing. And I'm glad there's people like you doing it and talking to local people, especially people that normally wouldn't have an outlet anywhere else.
Yeah. That's really, we've been doing this now for like not this particular show, but just doing different versions of podcasts for like 4 or 5 different years now. And to Rob's point, we had a famous TikTok comedian who's now just a regular comedian. And we saw like how quickly it built up the audience. But I just feel like there is still like this really big opportunity to like be the local podcast. And it's kind of contrary to like what the social media platforms want you to do, but like if you could connect with people and then just harness their networks, that's, I feel like, the way that we want this to kind of go.
Yeah, that's great. Long Island's is an excellent place a launching pad for that, because you have a lot of people competing for attention, and Long Island is a very particular culture, and it's a very particular different. I mean, it's a very diverse area. Obviously, you have every different kind of culture and every different kind of person living in Long Island, and there's so many people here with so many interesting perspectives that although it's local and you could focus in on a local area, there's so many people here that it's almost like its own state.
Yeah.
You know, if you compare Long Island's population to the rest of the country, if it was its own state, it would be one of the most populous states out there. Yeah. So you have a really good breeding ground here for a lot of ideas and a lot of interesting people.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's definitely a lack of, well, now I'm like 42 now, 43, but like there's definitely a lack. When we started this place maybe 6 years ago, we were trying to like attract more younger like musicians and talent and stuff like that, and there's definitely a lack of that. But I think the podcast platform is good for this area.
Yeah,
for sure.
And I don't know much about music. I mean, obviously I'm a fan of all different kinds of music. I don't know anything about it myself, but I think our generation, because I'm around the same age as you, although you have all your hair and I don't.
I just got a haircut, so don't,
they were very
doesn't always look like this.
Like our generation was very into music. I remember growing up with guys that were in bands and always trying to make it. And then I see like the younger generation, they don't seem drawn to it the same way. They're not as artistic. They seem much more tech driven, much more driven toward university and academics and stuff like that. They're not like our generation was. So maybe they're out there, maybe they aren't. I don't really know.
Yeah. I don't know, Rob. What do you know? You're plugged into local music scene.
I was just talking about this the other day with one of my friends. So like, the way that people consume like entertainment and media is, where we've been in the midst of this revolution that's been taking over all of society for, now almost like a decade now. We're like a decade into like what people call like Web 3.0. And that same sort of revolution is happening in the way that people experience like things that they consume. Netflix took over TV and, streaming became this huge thing. People for many, many years said that radio was on the way out and that, we were going to see the death of radio and, there weren't going to be any radio stations anymore. And what happens with podcasting now, it's like, we're in like radio 3.0. Now all of a sudden, radio is like as alive as it's ever been. And it's like finally found its format. And the same thing is happening with music too. It's, the way that people consume music is definitely changing with people having more access to, a whole catalog of stuff. It wasn't just, whatever you're experiencing is whatever albums you own. When you can just go out into the world and pick whatever
that's a good point
music that you want, it makes people's palette a lot more diverse.
That's a really good point. I remember, you go to the mall, you wait for an album to come out, you wait in line for it. If it was sold out, you didn't get your hands on it. You would wait months for something, and then sometimes you get an album and there'd be one good song on it. The rest of them were terrible, and now you're waiting another 6 months for something. Now you're right. You have access to it all the time, anywhere, instantly. So it probably does concentrate things and make things a little bit harder. But you make another good point about Netflix and streaming. People are really in their houses now a lot more than they were when we were growing up. They don't go out as often. The groceries get delivered. The people aren't really going to the movies, theaters anymore, probably not going to see concerts. It seems like a lot of things are focused on people staying in, which is, to me, is unfortunate. Very unfortunate.
It is.
Especially for musicians that prefer to play live and stuff like that.
Well, that's like the way to make money now too, right? Like it's hard to used to make money off of selling an album.
Sales, and now there are no sales anymore.
It's interesting.
So now it's all, whether or not, you can land a good deal, or whether or not you have brand awareness, or whether or not you're able to sell your music within, the commercial sphere and the sync landscape. But that same effect, like you see the same thing in movies as well. A lot of movies are struggling to get box office numbers are really, really difficult for a lot of people. Even when they get to streaming and when a movie finally is able to be released into the world, you're just not seeing the same margins and the same return as we see now.
I saw a stat the other day that like the movie theater capacity is like 11%.
It's I've taken my family a couple of times since my kids have been a little older, and the places are empty when you go. It's empty. And it's nothing like when we were growing up. I remember on a Friday night, the movie theaters were packed. You couldn't get into anywhere.
Packed.
You had to be there early. You had to have tickets, and it was like an event. It doesn't seem to be that way anymore, unfortunately.
You from Long Island originally?
Yeah, I grew up here.
In Montauk?
No, I've lived all over. I grew up in not far from here. I grew up in Copiague. I moved later on to Centeries and graduated from there. And then since adulthood, I've lived all over the place, from Long Beach to Montauk to brief time in Queens after Sandy. So I've spent my whole life here. Although I was born in Wyoming, which is an interesting tidbit about me. I was born in Cheyenne, Wyoming.
Oh, really? But didn't stay long.
No, 6 months.
Even a lot of people who went away, my family too, they would leave for like 6 months and then just be drawn back to where everybody was.
Yeah, I talked to a lot of people, through the real estate business, and believe it or not, a lot of people that leave Long Island end up coming back. They end up coming back. Even people that have left to go down south, they're back to that unique culture of Long Island. There's a lot of things that you can find here that you cannot find elsewhere.
Right.
Whether it's something as simple as bagels or food or the type of dough that they use. Believe it or not, people have told me that the food culture of Long Island is a reason to stay here.
I believe that.
Which blows my mind. Out of all the things.
Yeah. So real estate is your predominant.
Yeah, that's where I like to spend the majority of my time. It's a great business. It's an interesting business. It's a people-centered business, just like podcasting. You get to know a lot of people. You get to speak to a lot of people. It's an interesting business because you have market dynamics. You have the the economics of it, and then you have the people side of it, which is it has everything. It's a really interesting business to be in. And it's being on Long Island, it's a competitive business. You probably have 30,000 realtors on Long Island all competing for the same business, and it's a tight business right now.
Have you been doing it for a long time?
I had my license earlier in my life. I did it then, and I've had it for a while now. I'm really just getting back into it now as a second career.
You find it easy to do it like along with something else, or it's something that you got to like dive all in?
I am starting to believe that it should be, if you want to be successful in it, you really should be full time with it. It's a lot of work. To do it as a secondary thing is possible, and I've done it, but it is definitely challenging. It's a lot of work. A lot goes into it. There's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of phone calls. It's a lot of back and forth. Anyone that's bought a house or sold a house knows how much goes into it. But it is a very interesting business to be in.
The hours got to be tough. It's like you're working when everybody else isn't working.
Yeah, the weekends is the time when people want to see homes. Most people are doing Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and they want when they're looking for a home and they're looking to sell their home, the weekends is really the paramount time to do so.
Do you have an area that you like predominantly focus in, or?
Our team, I work on a great team in Signature, the Seth Levy team. It's out of the Merrick office. So we kind of, I would say we're centered there, Merrick,
Belmore.
Seaford, Belmore, Wantagh, that cluster of towns. But we go all over. They've had listings in Roslyn, on the North Shore, out east. It really doesn't matter. Just had one in North Babylon right here. So, we go anywhere on the island.
Wherever there's somebody looking to buy a house or somebody to sell a house.
Absolutely.
30,000. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's a huge industry.
Now, is that like fragmented down to people who like maybe sell a house a year, or that's like the total number? Or
it's everyone. Yeah. And I saw an interesting statistic. I don't want to misquote where I got it from, but I saw it. I read it. I think they said something like 20% of the realtors are doing like most of the business. Right. So you have a lot of people that are doing a little business, but not too much. So it gets concentrated in a couple of people that really know what they're doing, really good reputation.
What's going on right now? Like the rates are coming down, or like, I don't know. I've never owned a home and I try to stay away from it as much as possible because everybody that talks about it is, it's a lot of pain, but like
we went through a period of time where rates have been historically low. Very low. I got my house was a 3% rate, and there were people that paid lower rates than that during COVID. I'm not a financial professional, and I can't forecast the future, but I don't think we're going back to rates that low.
Yeah.
And the rates right now are, compared to the recent history, very high. But compared to a long perspective going back, let's say 60 years or something, the mortgage rates are actually just getting back to normal. But their mortgage rates are on price points that are very high. I mean, the median home right now in Nassau County is like 820,000. You know, high sevens to mid eights as the median home. So you have high rates, or historically not high rates, but high rates for the last 10 years on top of historically high prices. But we have an inventory problem on Long Island. There's just not a lot of houses for sale. So that's where I was mentioning the economic dynamics that come into it with supply and demand. You get a small supply of something and a high demand. People want to be here. They want to live here. Prices naturally go up. So unless there's more inventory or less demand, it seems like that's the way it's going to be.
Yeah. As you see a lot of it's like more people trying to move within the area or come from outside it.
It's both. I've seen a lot of, even in my own neighborhood, a lot of the homes that go up are, people leaving the 5 boroughs with remote work.
Right.
People aren't necessarily worried about the commute as much as they once were. But there's people that are leaving, certain towns on Long Island to go to different towns. People in starter homes looking to go up. It's a variety of things, but it just seems like, even comparing to the rest of the country, Long Island and Northeast has an insatiable demand right now.
Yeah.
Compared to other places, like Florida is declining. Some places in Texas are declining, but the Northeast is still a robust market. There's a lot of demand for things.
So surprising to me, especially with the remote work thing. It's like you don't need to live by these big cities anymore.
Yeah, I think Long Island offers like a very interesting mix of things, and you're close to the oceans. You have a lot of dining. You have a lot of people like space. When it gets down to it, people like to have a yard. They like to have a space of their own. So I've lived in the city briefly. I know a lot of people that do. One of the main reasons that they seem to want to leave is just to have more space to themselves. A larger yard, larger living space. And, compared to Manhattan prices, compared to some of the prices in Brooklyn, Long Island, actually a pretty good deal.
Yeah. I guess if you put it into perspective with that, I guess you're right. You said you were in Long Beach during Sandy?
Yeah. Yeah, that was an interesting time.
I'm sure.
I loved Long Beach. It was a great place to live. It was, that is the most unique microcosm on the island, in my opinion. Very interesting culture, very different than the rest of the island. I loved it there, and I was renting at the time. I didn't own, and I lived by the ocean. And I remember Irene happened first.
Oh, that's right.
And they hyped up Irene, and Irene amounted to very little. So Sandy's coming, and I was thinking to myself, it's going to be the same thing. It's not going to be anything. And my wife, but my girlfriend at the time was like, we're not going to stay here. We got to go to my apartment. We're not going to stay.
Were you in the West End or the East End?
I was in the first block of East Atlantic Beach, so right by the state streets where they end Nevada over there. So we decided to leave. And thank God she decided to say that we should leave, because when we came back to check the place, the apartment was 5 feet of water. Almost everything I owned was destroyed.
You were on the first floor?
Yeah,
or basement?
You really can't have a basement there. It's a couple steps down to the apartment, but they didn't really dig full basements. But the water on that street came up to waist height. The ocean flooded, the bay flooded, the whole island was essentially underwater, and it's like nothing anyone ever saw before. I mean, I had sand. There was sand on every street. It was incredible. It's hard to explain.
It was crazy. I used to sell beer down there. I used to work for Budweiser, or the Budweiser wholesaler, Claire Rose, and that was my route during that time.
Wow.
So I used to sell to that beer distributor in the West End, and then the one on Long Beach Road.
Yeah, they closed, I think, right?
The one on Long Beach Road is open. It's a funny story about that is the guy who owns that store, he's like, I tell the story on here all the time. He was like the toughest guy in the industry that owned those types of stores. There's like 100 of them on Long Island.
Wow.
And that was my first route as a sales rep. And everybody scared the shit out of me about this guy. And he was tough, but he was just fair. He's like, if you worked for him and you didn't bullshit him, he would do whatever you asked for him. He became like one of my best friends.
Wow.
So he sold the store to another best friend of mine, a kid who's in a band, and he runs it now. He's like kind of our age.
Yeah, that was a wild time there. Yeah. Then that's what made me...
That was enough.
Buy a house.
Yeah.
I didn't want to rent anymore, and I didn't want to be by the water, unfortunately. At that point, it kind of like, I was looking for a home in Long Beach at the time, and the prices were still relatively competitive there. And now it's unbelievable how much it costs to live in Long Beach now.
The whole economic structure down there changed because it was all these like legal apartments, a lot of like Irish, I think, immigrants and stuff like that were living there. And then it was like, they had to put everything to code, everything had to be up, and now it's like you go there. Yeah. It's like you're in like Manhattan Beach, and
I look at the prices, and I haven't personally done any business there, but it's it's amazing what people pay to live there. But again, where are you going to live?
Oh yeah.
With ocean view, bay view, with all those restaurants, with all that dining, it's just an incredible place to be.
It's interesting though, like the way that it changed from like rentals to now people own it. What it did to like the bars and restaurants and stuff down there, because there's just way less people.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
We would drive in. I mean, I grew up. We were driving into Long Beach, to socialize. I remember taking the ride. I was at the time living in Suffolk County. And, you would drive an hour and a half to go socialize there. Like that place was 15 years ago was something different.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
It's an interesting place too. Like even growing up, like I grew up in Lindenhurst and like I never heard about Long Beach until I would say like out of high school. And then when I went there, I would be like, what is this place?
That's
this place
wild. We grew up right next to each other.
Oh yeah, that's right. Copeg. Yeah. What year did you graduate?
01. But I left Copeg in 98. But
I graduated in 2000.
Do you know Westgate? Her Westgate turns into Brookside Court. That's
right.
where I grew up in.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, a bunch of people that are on some of the shows and stuff there from Copeg.
Interesting place. Another interesting place. Seems
to be also kind of like growing a little bit.
Yeah. I see a lot of prices coming out on things that are listed, and I was shocked. Growing up, it was another place that I would think was very affordable, very doable for most people, but now it seems like a lot of things are just out of reach.
Well, there was no place like Lindenhurst. When I remember we were in a couple of like networking groups, and I would go to one in the diner in Lindenhurst, and I knew nothing about real estate, but the two agents that were in the networking group that we were in were showing us the stats of like how many houses had sold in like the last 90 days just in Lindenhurst. It's like everybody was like flooding in there once it got fixed up after Sandy.
Yeah, it's interesting how neighborhoods change. If you look at a neighborhood or a place 100 years ago, all the different changes that it's gone through, and even like since we grew up, it's just a different place now.
Yeah, totally different.
Everything that existed there when we were growing up is gone now, basically, and then it's been replaced by other things.
Fast.
Long Beach, same thing. I wonder what it's going to be like, 30 years from now.
So how did you get into like what you're most interested in, your hobby, or would you call it your hobby, or?
Yeah, I would call it a hobby.
Obsession?
Yeah, it could borders on that. It borders on that. And I'll start by saying that the hobby, when I first saw people engage in this hobby, I have to admit, I thought it was the lamest thing in the entire world.
Really?
Yeah, I'd see people metal detect on the beach, and I always wondered, what are they looking for? Like, what could they possibly find on the beach? Are they looking for jewelry? Are they looking for change? Like, how could this be a satisfying hobby? And getting back to looking at podcasts and YouTube and stuff, these algorithms are so sophisticated, they know exactly what to feed you. So because I'm into history to begin with, I started getting YouTube suggesting videos, and a lot of them were metal detecting videos. So I had a long commute, and I was watching videos, just to pass the time. And I start seeing what some of these people are finding here on Long Island, some of these historic artifacts, stuff from colonial times, stuff from, the early 1800s. And of course, I know the history of Long Island. People have been here for, eons, and it's been settled by Europeans since the mid 1600s. So I said, is it possible that you could actually find some of this stuff? And, being a lover of history, I decided to try it out and to see if I would be good at doing it and if I could find things. And I found amazing things. And since then it hooked me, because I'm actually, people that are engaged in this hobby and doing it properly are recovering lost pieces of history that will basically rust away and be gone forever. And, if you're into history, if you're a person that likes it, there's very little that you can do other than visit museums or read books, which is both things are great if you're into it. But this is like hands-on, you're getting exercise, you're outdoors, and you're recovering things that to me are priceless, things that people have lost hundreds of years ago.
So you go from like getting served stuff on YouTube or wherever, and then what was like the first time you went out and like looked for something? Is it like clubs or groups or stuff? Or
I'm not in. I have a couple friends that are engaged in it, and believe it or not, it's actually popular among people even younger than me.
Really?
People. Again, if you have no interest in history, it's going to be a boring waste of time. People that I talk to that aren't into history, aren't into American history, are bored to death of it. But if you are into history, it's actually infinitely interesting, because we look around. We look around here. What was here? This wasn't in necessarily buildings, obviously, for forever, maybe 50 years. But what was here before that? Long Island was basically many, many patchworks of farms, and it was very rural until the 1920s. And what was it like when it was settled? There's very few places left undeveloped. There's very few places on Long Island you can go and say this is what it looked like once before. That being passionate about history and being able to pull something from the ground that's still there is just infinitely interesting to me. So anyway, I get suggested this video, and it's a guy, and it's in a park not far from where I live.
Oh wow!
And this guy pulls out of the ground, coins from the late 1700s, and they're authentic. And I was amazed that this parkland has never been touched, never been developed into homes. Maybe it had been a farm or something in the past, but people dropped things, people that lived there, settlers that were there, people that, that were here before this was the United States of America, when this was still Dutch or English colony, depending on where you are on the island. And here this guy maybe going down 6 inches into the ground and recovering things from their lives.
Now, when you say park, you not like a developed park. You mean like just like a...
Yeah, like a field.
Okay.
Different parks, obviously, public places have different rules about doing it. Most of what I do is I get permission from people that are landowners, and, when I have the time, which is very rare. Out east, the North Fork, the South Fork, still a lot of farmland.
Right.
You can get a lot of permission out there, people living out there since the 1600s. And I found things out in Southold, things out in Wading River that would blow your mind. It would completely blow your mind. A lot of the War of 1812 was fought here. Obviously, the Revolutionary War was fought here. We find things, musket balls, buttons from these people's uniforms that fought in these battles. Obviously coins, people drop coins, but it's just something different. Everybody has a hobby, and if you engage with people about their hobby and it doesn't interest you, your eyes glaze over. But this one really hooked me because of history. To me, was always a passion, and I was really getting a lot out of it by reading books, but there's nothing physical about that. There's no connection there. It's just reading and using your imagination, maybe looking at photographs, but the metal detecting actually connects something physical, something happening in the moment with the past.
Yeah, that's crazy. You're like taking a step back in time.
Yeah, it's the closest thing to me. I say like it's a cliche in the hobby, but it's the closest thing you're going to get to time travel in our lifetime.
Well, that's true. That's an interesting way to look at it.
Who dropped this coin? I recovered a coin from 1694, right? So it was a half penny from Ireland. Ireland was part of the, obviously part of the UK, so it had the monarchs at the time, which was Queen Mary and I think William, right? So someone dropped this probably the early 1700s on Long Island. We were a British colony. These were people that settled the country. This is people that were here that, they didn't have heat. They didn't have electricity. They lived in very basic places. So when I recovered this, I'm holding something that was minted in 1694.
It's wild.
And it blows my mind because I'm like, who dropped this? It makes me interested in knowing, like, this isn't a coin that sat in a coin shop or in someone's collection that just passed between collectors and has no provenance. But this is something that somebody dropped 300 years ago, and now here I'm holding it for the first time. It's the first time it sees sunlight in that long.
That's wild. How do you authenticate like that? How do you know like that's where it's from?
Well, a lot of times you'll recover things and it's so far gone that you'll never know what it is.
It's not recognizable.
But some of it, particularly anything made out of precious metals, silver or gold, if you're lucky to find that, the elements don't ruin it. It's basically just as good as the day that it was made.
So there's markings on it that you can kind of connect the dots to.
Absolutely. Years, legends, things that are written on it, the faces, the bust that they use. A lot of times it's impossible to figure it out, but sometimes you could just nail down a time frame. And what I really am passionate about is, colonial history, pre-Revolutionary War, Revolutionary War, Confederation era, early American history. And I've been very fortunate to recover a lot of things from that time period.
How do you there must be some sort of a method of where you go.
So that's really where the work is, and that's what turns a lot of people off, because that's where you're reading and you're studying old maps and you're looking at this map and you're connecting the roads that are here now to roads that were there in colonial times. And, we had roads here on Long Island that go back all the way to the 1600s, Wantagh in particular, Wantagh Avenue goes back way into the 1700s. Old Jerusalem Road goes back into the 1700s. And, obviously everything else was fields and undeveloped land at the time. But going forward, all that was filled in with homes. So now you're looking at, a suburban area and you're trying to pick out areas that are not developed. And, you reach out to property owners from time to time, and, some of the people that own the homes are interested in the history of where they live. And then you'll go to them and they're astounded at what we pull out of yards sometimes.
That must be cool. That must be really cool to be a homeowner. Do you show you just reach out to them and say
yeah, I've written people letters, I've written emails, I've gone and I rarely knock on people's doors because I think it's not a welcome thing to do, especially in Long Island. People don't want you knocking on their door. I don't want anyone knocking on my door for the most part. But once in a while you'll get a person who, for instance, a couple of the people out east, they're 4th, 5th generation farming that land, and their great grandparents bought it when they immigrated here. And they go, you really think you're going to find something here? What we do is, and I'll show them Spanish colonial coins that I found there, buttons that have fallen off of people's, attire from the War of 1812, particularly Wading River, where there were War of 1812 battles that took place there. And the looks on some of these people's faces, especially if they're history lovers, it's priceless, because they never knew this stuff was sitting on their property.
Yeah, they're so doubtful, and then you just prove them wrong. That's cool too. The finding of stuff is just that. That to me is, like you said, the stepping back in time. I used to work for the Greenport Harbor Brewery, and one of our founders out there, he was close friends with the guy who started the Blue Point Brewery originally, and they were crazy dudes. And we would be working. I was on the sales team, so we'd be out there working, and he would just disappear for hours. And I'm like, where the hell's Rich, and where's the other guys, Pete from Blue Point? Yeah. And they're we'd see him 2 hours later walking in a field.
Really?
But they were going for
sir,
for arrowheads, I think.
Yeah, that's that.
But there's no way of using the technology. Can you find stuff like that?
With arrowheads, and I haven't found a lot of them. The arrowheads I found out in Wading River, I gave to the landowner, because I'm not too much into Native American artifacts, although my grandfather was obsessed with Native American artifacts and the entire culture of Native Americans. He had a whole entire room in his house dedicated to American Indians. He was extraordinarily passionate about it, so I'm sure he in his day would have probably loved to do that. But a lot of times the arrowheads will be just right there on the surface. Yeah. When I was walking one of the fields, it was right there, and it's, if you know what you're looking for, they're unmistakable.
I went arrowhead hunting one time in Virginia. I guess when they turn the seasons over and they till the fields out, and I'm like, this is crazy. What am I doing? And I'm looking down for an hour, 2 hours, and people are showing me shit they got. And I'm like, how do you even know that's it? And then I found one that was perfect. Yeah. You could not mistake that's what this was. Yep. And I was like, oh shit, now I get it.
And now you're holding something in your hand that potentially 5,000 years old. Yeah. Now I'm talking about a coin that's 200-300 years old, the founding of our country and so on. Native American artifacts, you could be holding something that maybe is 10,000 years old. That's wild. Still sitting there. That last time a human hand touched it was 10,000 years ago. That completely blows my mind.
Yeah. Well, hey, Vin. Welcome to the show, Vin. Sorry, my funeral ran very late. That's all right. Yeah, that's super cool. So I get lost on your all your Instagram stuff for a disturbing amount of time.
What's interesting? A lot of people tell me that.
Well, I'm not knocking it, but the transition is nice and slow, so they stay.
You're talking about that.
I mentioned that.
So they stay, and then I'm
people have
staring at the goddamn phone, and it blows my mind that not that long ago that was there, and the jump in what's been built in reality a few lifetimes is insane.
I like to make it slow so people get a chance to actually take it in and look at the pictures and the details. But as I was saying to him before, people will the attention span of this generation is incredible. Yeah. They want something in 10
literally
seconds.
4 seconds.
Yeah.
To grab their attention and go from there.
So I leave it 10 to 16 seconds. It gives people enough they could pause it or screenshot or whatever they want. So
yeah. You're a Wanto guy, right?
I am.
Yeah, me too.
I didn't grow up there, but I grew up close to it, and I was there from time to time because my grandparents lived in Massapequa Park, and we would always be in the same area. But Wanto's a beautiful place, and you can't get a place with more history than Wantagh. It's just impossible.
Is that where you started out, like in your own backyard type of thing, or you
Yeah.
started to go to places where you knew there was going to be more?
What's really interesting about that is I was frustrated with the hobby. Obviously would love history regardless of whether I was good at the hobby or not, but I was frustrated with the hobby, and I tried my own backyard, because my own backyard, going back in Wantagh, the history of where my property is goes back to at least the mid 1600s, being settled as farmland. And I found a flat button in my own yard that I dated to maybe the 1820s, and from that point forward, I was hooked. Because again, it sounds so boring to the people that don't appreciate history, that why would you care about someone's button? But to me, it's someone who lived here before the Civil War, before we had even electricity in our homes, when there were only just a couple of houses in Wantagh, and he was working in that field, and it came off and it fell into the dirt, and it sat there until I found it, and it was on my property. And then I started researching like the family that owned it, and like what they produced there. And Wantagh, of all the places in Nassau County, if you took those blue and yellow markers that you see when you're driving around, the like historical markers.
Yeah.
If Wantagh had all of them still in place, where if they replaced the ones that had fallen down, I think you have 13 historical sites, which is more than double any other town in Nassau County.
Where in Wantagh are you?
I'm in the northern part of Wantagh. So Wantagh really began as a Jerusalem settlement, right? And the original Jerusalem settlement was basically where the southern state and Wantagh Avenue meet.
Okay.
Duck Pond over there, that area. That's where the settlement began, and it kind of branched off from there. When Wantagh really got built up in the 1860s was when the railroad came down through the southern part of Wantagh, which was called downtown.
The Ridgewood station.
Yes. It was called Jerusalem. Then they named the southern portion of the hamlet into Ridgewood for a short period of time.
Hamlet. That's not a word I didn't hear until I was 30 and well into my 30s. And I should say probably like 27, because I was in college. And they were like, "Oh, what hamlet are you in?" I'm like, "What the fuck is a hamlet?"
I don't even know if that's the right word.
It is. That's the right word. Town is like, some white trash word they use.
Well, there's
what town are you from?
Out by me, there's like Bellport, which is, not the most desirable area, but then there's like the hamlet of Brookhaven, which is technically in Bellport. So everybody that's out there says, "Oh yeah, I live in the hamlet of Brookhaven."
Well, right. We live in the town of Hempstead.
Yeah.
So that's how it really goes. You're in the town of Hempstead, county of Nassau,
right?
Hamlet of Wantagh, or wherever you are.
Well, at the time, Nassau County was part of Queens County. When Nassau County did not become its own county till 1899, so you were Queens until the Suffolk border. Suffolk had always been the county. So where we are now is like close to, I guess, the town of Babylon. We're in the town of Babylon.
Yeah.
That was the border of Queens County.
Shit! Really?
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and then they were
from Queens.
They were consolidating the 5 boroughs in the late 1800s, and then certain townships of Queens County said, "No, we don't want to be part of the city of New York," which is Hempstead, North Hempstead, Oyster Bay.
Money. They keep raising the goddamn taxes on us.
Yeah, you got to grieve your taxes.
Oh yeah,
every year.
Shit.
Every year.
So once you obviously know way more than I do, but like when I was a kid, not Cherrywood. What was the other one? Across from Cherrywood?
Willowwood shops. Yeah.
Willowwood used to be all greenhouses.
Yeah.
When and I forgot about that, and then I saw it on your thing. I was like, "Holy shit! I remember that."
Dorenheim is what they called them.
And it was from like Wantagh Avenue, well back.
That was that land, as well as Cherrywood, was owned by the Seaman family. And the Seaman family is one of the founding families of the town of Hempstead and of Wantagh. They owned all of that. Obviously, was Cherrywood Estate was there long before.
That was their house, right, on that corner where KFC is.
They had across, yes, there was Captain Seaman's was on that side of Wantagh Avenue, but the Seamans still on the other side as well until Dorenheim had it. And that was like one of the biggest, I guess they were making like potted plants or something at the
tulips.
time.
I think it was a big tulip farm.
And then like the 70s, it fell into disrepair. The kids were like setting fires in there, and then they just said, we'll make it into
I was in the late 80s.
We'll make it into a Starbucks, which is where I got this from. Right there.
Oh, yeah.
Is it like value in like when places are being like when homes are being built and stuff and like jumping in there then?
Yeah, if you can get permission. Again, like every piece of land is owned by somebody, so you need you need permission to do it. And luckily Wantaw still has a lot of there's a lot of homes sprinkled out through Wantaw that is from the 16 and 1700s still standing.
How do you find that out? Because I think mine is not that old, but like we get a survey or something like that?
I mean, you could. There's a variety of ways to do it. The public records. I mean, I could look at a building and tell you, when it was built, basically just by looking at the foundation of it.
They say the love of history is early onset Republican.
They do say that. I don't know.
I was always fascinated by history. Always, even in like when I was a young kid growing up, like social studies classes. They didn't call it history back then, but like I paid attention to that, and I think the value in history is paramount to anything that you want to learn about the future, because it does repeat itself, and maybe it's not the exact same way, but you learn your lessons through it. I think the key to history is a good storyteller.
Yeah, that's true.
To make it interesting.
Absolutely
and
right.
Fortunately for me, I had great teachers growing up that captivated my attention. Not so much in math.
Yeah, math was a challenge for me too. But yeah, history, I don't think there's anything. I don't think there's any single thing that you could learn about more important than the history of where you're from and the history of your country. And as you said, history does tend to rhyme or repeat or whatever you want to say, because human nature doesn't really change throughout the years. And understanding history and where people made mistakes and where people were successful is, again, applicable to the future.
Those mistakes, exactly.
Absolutely right.
What's your favorite? So I think out of all your Instagram posts, I think my favorite is the one. I think it's Wantaw Avenue looking north, with a horse and carriage going north.
Yeah.
And like all the trees and like tree lined street like that. Like it's still like that, but it's not like that.
Yeah, that image.
And it's horse and carriage.
Yeah, I think that if we're talking about the same image, I believe there's also a vehicle parked, a Cadillac that's parked there, which was owned by an engineer of the Brooklyn Waterworks.
I didn't know.
So it was like the very beginning of automobiles. There's several ones that I have with horses and carriages. I could be referencing a different one. The one you're talking about, was it snow? Was there snow on the ground? Okay, yeah, that was just straight up horse and carriage. Yeah. So Wantaw Avenue.
Dude, it wasn't that long ago.
No, it wasn't.
It's literally, it's 2025, right? When do you estimate that picture to be?
I'd say like that one, maybe late 1800s, early 1900s.
Bro, it's two lifetimes.
Yeah.
That's it. And it's not even two, it's 1.5.
Yeah, it is. At times it feels like an eternity, right? At times it feels like so much is.
This day feels like an eternity. The struggle it took for me to get here 40 minutes late.
The days are long and the years are short,
yes,
right? That's what they say.
Somebody told me about having kids.
Especially now, too, though. It's like
Yes.
the pace that things are moving, it makes you think that was so much even longer ago, but it's really not that long ago.
It's not, dude. It's 1.5 lifetimes ago.
It's wild.
I think it has a lot to do with the density of people and the fact that there's not as much open space, and you just see houses, infinite rows of houses. And then after the World War II era, basically everything on Long Island became, we went from a rural agrarian place to a suburban, almost like city-like lifestyle in one generation.
Do people ever call the police on you? Because I see like you go to the park and you look.
No, I actually stay very clear of any violating any rules. Like, so if I'm on a piece of property, I have permission to be there, whether it's public property or private. There are places you can't go.
For the public?
Every town and village and county has their own rules. Some places are more welcoming than others. Some places, some places they'll ask you, like, what are you doing with the stuff? It's people have this image of metal detecting, and they think you're digging 6-foot holes in the ground to recover things when it's 3 inches, 4 inches down.
6-foot holes.
Exactly. Exactly. It's not like
I really don't either.
Have you ever had any like disputes with stuff you found? Like people think it's theirs, or like they want it, or that's interesting.
If I reach out to a landowner and I say, listen, I've read about the area you live in. These are the families that were here, 300 years ago. I think there's going to be interesting historical artifacts on your property. If you allow me permission to look for them, if I get some free time, you have the choice of what you want.
Right.
A lot of times they don't want anything. A lot of times they pick through the stuff that I find and I give it to them. The moment for me that's memorable is just recovering it. Like keeping it is great. I brought some stuff to show you guys if you ever want to take a look at it.
Yeah, definitely.
But keeping it, this stuff, most of the stuff is not financially.
Right.
I don't sell the stuff anyway, but you're not going to make a lot of money for it. The value is in the history, is in the recovery of it.
You check on that though, right?
Always. Yeah, always. Absolutely.
Walking around with 40 million in coins.
Yeah, I would love that. I would love to find something. I mean, you people.
Me too.
There's about. There's so many articles that come out where people look on their own property or on their own farms and they'll find hordes of gold coins that people buried, 100, 200 years ago. I haven't
Can I
been.
borrow that thing?
Yeah, you can. I give you one. I have an extra one for you.
Be at the funeral home. Nope. That was from a long time ago.
I don't see a lot of people doing that stuff like that.
I see them at the beach, right? Well,
Yeah.
are those guys?
But at the beach, they're just looking for people that drop shit, right?
Yeah, diamond ring.
Those guys actually, believe it or not, I've met a few of them. I have no interest in doing that. I would never waste my time doing that. But a lot of those guys, the amount of gold jewelry that they recover is it makes financial sense to them because look, gold's $3,000, $3,300 an ounce now.
Yeah, it's just a lot.
They're making money doing that.
I have like a Cuban link bracelet that I inherited. Like 10, 12 years ago, was probably worth like $7,000.
Yeah.
And I brought it to get like the clasp replaced on it. And the guy was like, "Hey, I want to sell this." And I was like, "Why?" He's like, "Oh, it's worth well over 10,000."
Yeah.
I was like, "Good to know."
That's what's interesting about gold.
And it's
precious metals.
it's a lot, but it's not really a lot. It is, but it isn't. So
just the appreciation of it.
There's only so much of it.
Yeah.
It won't change your life, but
No. Unless we find that sunken pirate ship. I hear that's like big money if you ever find a legit intact pirate ship.
I feel like that would be confiscated immediately if you found it.
Yeah, I guess it depends where you are, right? Like if you're in the Caribbean, you're going to get like disappeared.
Real pirates.
Probably by the government.
Right.
You'd be like, yeah, that's cute.
I wonder how much, we talked about this on one of the other shows once, like how much unfound treasure there really is in the
So
world.
much, probably.
Think?
Do you think it's like, and I guess I'm being corny, I'm not trying to be funny about it, but like, do you think there's ever a situation where you go into like Indiana Jones, with not us, but just in general, do you think that exists where it's like
Open up
gobs and gobs of like gold cups and rubies and diamonds?
I guess anything's possible. If you study, if you do study history, you realize that until very, very recently in Western culture, like money was tied to precious metals in every, and the people would hoard it. Obviously,
there's no gold in our vaults.
Wealth was confiscated all over the place, and wealth was concentrated in the people that led the countries or the empires or whatever. So that wouldn't surprise me if they found that. I mean, you find someone in Arkansas or Tennessee or something. You still had a farm field and found an entire hoard of gold coins from the Civil War, with people burying them then. So during the
were we active in the Civil War, like this area?
Yeah, not. Of course, everyone came from here to go. Right. my great three great grandfather came here from Germany in the 1840s or the 1850s. He went and fought for the Union side of the Civil War in the 1860s, and he came from New York. And he went as far south, I think, as South Carolina. So there was a lot of people coming from this area going down there. We had a lot more activity battle-wise in the War of 1812 here.
Really?
Yeah. And a lot of the stuff that I find actually comes from the War of 1812.
Have you ever found like where you think of like bone fragments?
Bones? No, never found bones. And I'm not
just go to Jones Beach.
I'd have to ask my wife. My wife was a forensic scientist, so she would know this, how bones decompose. I don't know how long bones stay.
You're one episode too late. We just did this.
I was going to say, you might know too. Yeah, with your
we just did. We were talking about body farms.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Body farms. Yeah. I don't know how long do they stay in the ground?
Well, forever so far.
Really?
Think about the dinosaurs. Well, it took all that pressure and all that heat to turn that into oil.
Yeah.
And they're still finding them intact. So bones stay for a long time. Bones and hair seem to last a long time.
Like a ring with like a finger still attached to it? Is that what you're asking
about?
There's
no ring. Just a finger.
Just a finger.
Took that shit.
Yeah, so far no bones, thank goodness.
Is there like, what are you most excited about like now? Like, is there a certain thing you're working on or a certain area you're working?
I've had such a lack of free time lately that I haven't been able to. But like I said, I've made some connections with some people out in Wading River that have lots and lots and lots of acres, and the amount of stuff that I found in their farm fields has just been incredible. I really would like to get back out there again.
What about like the upstate regions?
Yeah, if I had the free time, I would definitely explore upstate. People don't realize that, we think of New York, Manhattan specifically, and obviously the outlying area as being like, where civilization, European settlements started, but upstate New York had a tremendous amount as well. And they were mining, they were minting coins up there. Early American coins were minted there. So I know people that do upstate, they actually do find and recover a lot of
one of the guys
stuff.
was a cemetery I saw you have.
Yeah, some people add me to things on there because I guess they want to collaborate, and then hopefully my audience will like what they're doing. This guy seems to go to cemeteries and like research the people that are there. A couple interesting cemeteries in Wanto. The Jackson Cemetery.
Yeah.
You have Revolutionary War veterans buried there. You have Civil War veterans buried there. You have the cemetery behind the old Quaker cemetery on Twin Lane. You have some Civil War veterans there, and there's actually I haven't been able to confirm it. I'm still trying to confirm it. It's probably going to be hard to confirm it, but on Bunker Avenue, there's a burial ground on people's private property.
Sick.
Somewhere on Bunker Avenue, with very early colonial.
It's got to be
cemetery.
close to Walter Avenue.
Yes,
Imagine.
I have an idea where it might be.
How do we prove that?
It's
GPR?
Wherever it is, it would be on private property, so you would obviously need the landowner's permission to look, but there are no visible gravestones.
Would you want to know if you were the homeowner?
That's a good question. I would want to know.
Yeah, me too.
I would definitely want to know.
Definitely.
Do you have to disclose that if
it's
a real thing
in the real estate world?
Yeah,
I would imagine that's something you definitely have to tell somebody.
By the way, glad you love the house. Small speed bump, but there's 14 people buried in the front lawn.
14 colonial women underneath this.
There's a farm out east.
2 slaves.
Lewin Farms, right? Lewin Farms. I had permission to go on them.
I know that name.
It's a huge farm out there out east. In the woods, there's gravestones in the woods.
Is there?
Yeah.
Dude, that's
That they didn't know about?
No, it's just part of their property. It's just there because at some point those woods were somebody's home, and you bury
on the property.
Bury on the property.
That's creepy.
You walk in the woods and you see
just
a gravestone.
walking your dog and you stop pulling me. Guys, I said, what the headstone.
And it's a whole family that died of some like cholera or one of those diseases that they had no control over back then, all buried together.
OG COVID.
That's what that is.
You can't do that now, right? You can just bury your family in your backyard.
You can do whatever you want. It just takes money.
Wow.
The problem is
Deep.
Trump buried his ex-wife on his golf course.
That's right.
Interesting. Yeah.
I just think like good luck selling the goddamn house.
Yeah.
Like,
That's yours
that
for
conversation is like, glad you love the house, but also too I need an easement because my mom's in the backyard. And we want to visit her on holidays and birthdays and stuff. Like, how do you pull that off?
You'd definitely be cutting out a lot of the market there, probably.
Yeah.
Have you traveled anywhere to
I haven't. I've done a little bit in South Carolina.
What would you say is like the richest area to go to for that? It's got to be
history.
Yeah.
I would say parts of Florida were settled by the Spanish in the 1500s, and I know people that have done parts of Florida, St. Augustine, that area.
And they the Fountain of Youth they thought was there, right?
Yeah, and they find a lot of Spanish. See, the Spanish were really powerful back then,
right.
And their money was everywhere. Like the most common currency used in colonial America were Spanish reals, the silver currency, not copper currency. So we find Spanish coins all over the place on Long Island, but it's particularly Florida. That would be a great place to go because that's really the only place in America that had European settlement in the 1500s, like a significant amount of European settlement. New York is great, obviously. Anywhere
population, right?
Yeah, and you can just look at old maps and see what was what the population density of the colonies were at different points in time, and obviously the larger the population density, the more likely you are to find something.
So I love there's another one you have. It's the Mandalay area.
Yeah,
and it's like 200 acres for sale.
Yeah.
$1,500.
A guy in the Preservation Society of Wantagh.
They had a fire recently.
Yeah. That was. Oh, thank God that they.
I think they got a lot out, right?
Yeah, thank you to the Wantagh Fire Department because that was they got there quick and yeah, we have to thank them.
I know.
That place.
My whole family's in there.
Yeah, that place.
I just hate giving them credit. Not my family, not the fire department.
That is such a rich amount of history in that building.
The whole setup is awesome too. I've been there literally hundreds of times between like being a kid, having kids in the area, and it's like every time I'm like, it doesn't amaze me anymore, but I'm never bored.
Yeah. Have you gone in there recently?
We were there for when it happened.
Oh, okay. Are you a member of the Preservation Society? Did you ever join? It's a great place.
No, I'm not. But it does. All that stuff fascinates me. Whether it's that picture or the one, I get a kick out of the. It's like Wanto Avenue looking east at Bunker Avenue.
Oh yeah.
My buddy's house is in that picture.
Which one is his?
So he's the one with the big U hedge on Bunker going. Maybe it's like
near Roosevelt.
So I think it's the second house after Roosevelt.
Okay.
And it's like it's in that picture. Like that's the house. Like and there's no doubt about it.
There may even be a picture of that house too.
Is it?
That exact house. Yeah. Bunker
if you have it, please send it to me.
Yeah. If you go on New York Heritage, it's a website. The Preservation Society's uploaded hundreds of pictures from Wanto up there. You know, they have again, out of all the towns on Long Island that have historical societies or preservation societies, Wanto does an amazing job of cataloging everything. And I've done my own research into the pictures, you know, and it's just Wanto. I mean, every town on Long Island probably has a similar history. Wanto just has such a unique history from the beginning till now that it's.
I would imagine it's because it's like at that time period, it's far enough out where it's considered like the country at that time period, but it's close enough where it's not like forever trip away.
There's a book written in the 1800s that you can find, and the book written in the 1800s is a history of Wanto. So they were already writing history books about the place in the 1800s before anything was really developed, and it talks about the variety of land there, like the bay, and how like how they would make money from the salt hay, and then how the ground and the soil and stuff was so good for farming further up. And you know, you would have people taking their herds of animals up to the Hempstead Plains, which is basically all flat land, like north of Wanto, Levittown, Island Trees. And I drive up Wanto Avenue, you know, 100 times a day, and I'm like, wow, can you imagine someone walking here with sheep and cows and everything? And then that's what it was. And so I think Wanto was like a very good place to be able to survive in a time when it wasn't easy to survive.
Right. So people ask me all the time. Well, not all the time. I shouldn't say like it's a big thing people come asking me all the time about. But like you have that conversation, like, you know, like what time period would you want to live in, like if you could switch? And I got to be honest, I always say right now, and it's only for one reason. Sound selfish. Air conditioning.
Yeah.
You know.
Definitely.
Air conditioning.
Air conditioning is a big one with me. I know that sounds stupid, but like, I value like the Victorian age. Like the fact that McDonald's is a goddamn sin.
Yeah.
In comparison to what was it? It was this big, beautiful hotel, the Wanto Hotel. And now it's a McDonald's. Like, you know, listen, I've eaten there drunk at 1 o'clock in the morning. And I'm appreciative at that moment. But if I could
take it back.
I read something that says modern times are easy on the body but hard on the soul. And then the past was much easier on the soul but hard on the body. And
character, and it puts things in perspective too. Like, you know, you could be arguing with somebody over you know, I don't know, something you said on a podcast or a TikTok or an Instagram, and it's so dumb in reality.
Yeah.
Back then, they were like, hey, we have to feed ourselves.
Yes.
Right. Like,
they did not have time to get into things because they were busy surviving. You know, wasn't as easy.
You cut yourself bad enough, you're dead.
But that's the thing about air conditioning. You wouldn't even know what that was.
Back then,
how would you know?
It's true. You know, you got a taste of it now, though.
I'm reading a book about the 5 points right now in Manhattan, and to just piggyback on the air conditioning. Some of the living arrangements in 1830s New York City are so horrific compared to anything that we experience today, that even if it was exaggerated, even if it was half as serious as what was written in that book, the living conditions in Manhattan in the 1830s in that neighborhood specifically were horrendous, horrible.
Yeah, well, and now those buildings are built up so much, and those foundations were never meant to hold that kind of weight.
Yeah.
And now they have to constantly fix those, and it's like, you know, you're talking about pre-World War I construction that needs to be updated now, and the reality is it needs to be torn down,
right?
And then rebuilt properly.
Yeah, that Manhattan's interesting because if you look at the skyline from south to north, you'll see like in the financial district all these huge skyscrapers. Then you'll see like really low buildings, and then Midtown you see these huge skyscrapers. It's because there's bedrock on those two areas, and the middle of it is more like, I wouldn't call it swampland, but it's not. You can't build skyscrapers there, so that part of Manhattan's never going to end up with skyscrapers unless they think of some other way of building them. Those buildings are always going to be like maybe
figure it out.
7 stories or something.
What'd you bring? What do you have that?
So can I?
You can push it forward. Yeah.
All right, great. So this is just a small sampling of things. So like, I didn't know what you guys would be interested in, but like in this box, right? You have buttons here. My favorite button is this one right here. It's got an eagle on it, standing on a globe, and it says Excelsior on it. And this is a militia button from the 1810, 1820 New York militia. So after the country was established, we didn't have standing armies the way that we do now. We didn't have 5, 6 branches of a military. So our defense was based upon having militias, and they would drill, and they would wear their uniforms, and you can look online and see what they look like. And every state had their own militia, which means they had their own buttons. And this is, I would say, fairly common in my world, but not common in society. Like, you're not going to see this anywhere unless you recover one. So like that's one of my favorites. You can look at that. The silver button is an officer's button from the War of 1812.
This is
the one here. That's it says Excelsior at the bottom. That's New York militia.
That's so crazy.
Right.
Somebody wore these, right?
This is these are all off of uniforms. That one right there is from the War of 1812. It's a Navy button. You can see the anchor that's on it.
Yeah.
The one all the way to the left, it says there's a 4.6 on it. Now that one is very interesting. I actually sent pictures of that button to a button society in London to get that authenticated, because I believe, and it's inconclusive, but my belief is that it is a 46th Regiment of Foot button from the British regulars that were here during the Revolutionary War. And I say that just based on the assessment that they made.
You guys want this shit back?
And believe it or not, they didn't.
Which camera you want me to show it to?
I'll probably you just hold it in front of me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's Civil War buttons there, War of 1812, Revolutionary War. That's kind of just like where I put military stuff.
And what is this one? These cannons? Or?
Yeah, that was a little more modern, probably World War I. That was a collar. They would wear that on their collar if you were in the artillery. This is a War of 1812 artillery button. And I just find these things infinitely interesting because...
Yeah, it was pinned to somebody's chest.
Especially War of 1812 stuff, because...
What was that person like? You run through that in your head.
Were they shot? Were they killed there? Because War of 1812... Exactly. What funeral home did they use at the time? Wading River had documented skirmishes with the British, where farmers in Wading River the British were trying to take their boats during the War of 1812, and the farmers actually defended their property. And to find something from the War of 1812.
What is this one?
That is from the Civil War, I believe. No, that's an eagle. That's a Civil War. On the shield is a regular American shield, so this would have been on just like a regular soldier. This wasn't like infantry or artillery or anything like that. This is a script A. I'm not sure you can see it. That's Artillery War of 1812. This one's very hard to see, but if you look at it with like a microscope, it's an eagle standing on a cannon, and that was an artillery button from the War of 1812. So, Revolutionary War, War of 1812, Civil War, all that stuff I would find priceless. These were not buttons that were saved from the time period and put in a collection and sold or auctioned. This was on someone's uniform, fell off into the dirt, and human hands never touched it again.
It's legit American history. It's pretty cool.
And now this, you could look through each one, right? So, these large copper coins, several of them were found in Wantagh. All right, they're from pre-United States of America. So they were when Wantagh was called Jerusalem, and Jerusalem was a British settlement. So several of these up here are British half pennies, King George II, 1740s, 1730s. This button, this copper coin right here, is probably my favorite coin I ever recovered in Wantagh. It is a Massachusetts 1 cent piece. In the Confederation of the United States, we did not have federal coinage. The Constitution allowed the federal government to coin money. Before that, the states were responsible for making their own coins. So this coin, copper coin, was Massachusetts' 1 cent. During that period of time, those coins would, you would have ones from New York, you'd have ones from New Jersey, you'd have ones from Connecticut. Every state minted their own coins. So this made its way from Massachusetts to New York during the Confederation era, very early on in the history of our country. And the ones from Wantagh obviously hold a special place in my heart because this is pre-United States, pre-Wantagh, pre-Ridgewood. This is when it was Jerusalem. So this one at the top left, I was telling him earlier, this was recovered in on a property in Huntington, and it's from 1694. It's a
how I know you said it's not that deep, but how deep do you think these things sat in the dirt?
None of these were any more than 6 inches below the surface of the ground. But most metal detectors won't really be reliable beyond 10 inches anyway. So that stuff's pretty lost.
Me too.
Laid that one up.
This next page these are all Spanish colonial coins. They're called reals. Except
those are the ones you're talking about in St. Augustine.
Yeah. So when people say pirate treasure, this is what they're referring to. They're referring to Spanish coins that...
Bro, that's all I want to do is literally hit the lottery and sail around the Caribbean like a pirate.
These ones down here at the bottom are very interesting pieces. There's 2 of them. They're referred to as trimes. They're from the 1850s, and they were 3-cent silver pieces coined by United States of America. It's the smallest silver coin that we ever made. The 2 on that flank this one here. And the reason they made them, they were 3 cents. And the reason they made them was because postage became 3 cents. So they didn't want to carry 3 heavy copper coins to buy postage. So they made these small silver coins so you could buy mail postage with it.
These are legit, huh?
Yeah, they're all copper. Most of them British half pennies. Some of them are bent because they've been hit by plows over the years and just ruined. But I like coins not necessarily for any reason other than they have dates and pictures and numbers, and I could say, oh, this person was, here in 1785 and dropped this. But those Spanish coins circulated in our country till the 1850s. They were considered lawful tender. So you were living in 1830 New York, you could trade with Spanish silver coins.
These are pretty cool.
Yeah, and if you go to the back few pages, you'll see a whole bunch of our cents. These ones. So these are considered large cents, right? So we have the...
These make sense to me.
These ones are all early 1800s. I think this one's 1802. So you figure Thomas Jefferson was president when that...
Like there's a chance that went through his pocket. I mean, not likely, but...
It's just, to me, I think back and say... Who is the person holding this and who dropped it? And
and back then it was
that could be probably a couple hours pay back then. So we had large cents until the 1850s, and then they went to the smaller ones, the Indian head cents, and they've been that size since then. But
I still get annoyed. I can never remember if a nickel is a dime. You know what I mean? Like that. I gotta think about it in my head.
Yeah, to drop something like that, it's like. Big deal back then. Definitely relatives of my wife.
Oh yeah, it would have affected.
What is this one? This one was cool.
So that's very interesting. So during the Panic of 1837, which was a financial panic, they stopped making a lot of coinage, and people needed small coins. So businesses started making their own coins called hard times tokens.
And history repeats itself. Now we're making fucking bitcoins. Excuse my language.
And they would circulate
bitcoins.
Those would circulate and trade. They'd have advertising written on them. If you ever Google 1830s, 1840s hard times tokens, it was people making their own money to circulate because our money was fixed weights of copper, fixed weights of silver, fixed weights of gold. So people didn't really care what picture was on the coin so long as they were able to trade and conduct commerce. So businesses took it upon themselves to make their own coinage. They even had ones that looked exactly like our coins, and they wrote on the back, not 1 cent.
You mean like counterfeit or
no? No, because it wasn't counterfeit because they didn't claim for it to be 1 cent. They literally wrote not 1 cent.
But it was the right weight.
Right weight, right diameter, same picture, so people could go back and forth. This one's an interesting one I found in Southold. You see the hole right through the center of it. People wonder why.
22.
They find so many ones with holes in it. There were points in time where washers cost more than 1 cent. So instead of going into town on a carriage, on a horse, or wherever you needed to go, what a general store to buy washers, people would just drill a hole and use the coins as a washer.
Interesting. That's interesting.
What's like are any of these of serious value?
No, I would say maybe $100 at the very highest one. Some of the silver coins might be, but again,
this one's beat up.
That one was, I think, melted in a fire. I believe that there was a house that burned, and that was just sitting in there. And
these are almost all Wantagh?
No, they're all from Long Island, but the ones that were from Wantagh that were my favorite ones that I recovered were three British halfpennies from the 1730s and 1740s, the Massachusetts cent, and there's a shield nickel from 1867 that I found in Wantagh as well. But the one thing that I should have brought that I didn't, which I regret, maybe if we ever meet again, I'll bring
Come over.
Tonight.
So you know those old...
Don't be weird.
You ever see those old pictures of colonists? They'd have buckles on their shoes.
Yeah.
Right? So they would wear socks up here, and then to keep their socks up, they would have another buckle on their socks. So like...
Yeah, what were those called?
They're called knee buckles. So I found a knee buckle in Wantagh from the 1720s.
No shit, really?
Yeah. So it was on somebody's leg holding their socks up.
I wonder where the body was. That's wild.
Yeah, Wantagh is just full of history, and they did a good job of preserving a lot of it.
That Seaman estate was enormous.
Yeah.
Like you look at those old maps, it literally runs from, if I'm not mistaken, like the 135 all the way through, like the entire woods was one guy's.
Well, Seaman's Neck Road,
right,
is also gets his name from them. It was two big families that were in Wantagh, the Jacksons and the Seamans.
And where the Jacksons were...
They were further south, so...
That was like Sunrise South, right?
No, from what I understand, Jerusalem Avenue. You know where you went to Wantagh High School? Mm-hmm. All right, so Wantagh High School, like the field, right? So Jerusalem Avenue runs right through there, and then Wantagh Avenue intersects with it. They say that intersection was kind of like where the land separated. So the Jacksons were further south of Jerusalem Avenue, where... St. Francis churches, their graveyard was there.
I wonder if they got along, those two.
I'd imagine they probably did.
Or were they like Hatfields and McCoys? Oh, fuck his house. I'll ruin your potato farm.
They were both, those families were both there, and that was basically it for them. It was just their homesteads there.
Now, what's with that on the maps? I noticed, like, there's a certain area in the woods that specifies Wantagh Woods.
Okay, so... If there's aerial photos of Wantagh and Nassau County you can look at from the 20s. They took pictures from airplanes, and they're actually pretty good. I have them posted on my Instagram page. But in the 20s and back, that section of Wantagh was basically woods. And they obviously were moving trees. And I don't know where they got it, what year that it became Wantagh Woods or what the actual boundaries of it are, but it takes its name from the fact that it was really just a forest that was still there, despite all the other farms that were there.
That's Wantagh Forest. Yeah. Or it says Forest.
Oh, Forest City, are you talking about?
No, so I live on Silverton.
Okay. Silverton, there's an interesting story about Silverton.
Oh, let's hear it.
Okay, so Silverton, right? You're next to Carrollton?
Yeah.
All right, so there's a house on the corner of Wantagh Avenue in Silverton. It looks like a regular house. It's brown.
Yep, I know. It's on the right side when you make the turn onto it.
That's a Jackson house. That's been there since the 1700s.
Oh, wow.
One of the owners after the Jacksons named their house Carrollton. That was their name of their house.
Okay.
So when they were building those roads, they named that road Carrollton after that house. So when you go beyond that south and you make the left onto Carrollton, that road is named after that house that's sitting there.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, that's one of the Jackson houses that still remain.
Think they know that?
I would imagine
the people that own the house? Absolutely.
I think the guy in that red Porsche needs to slow the fuck down when he drives down my block.
That house was landmarked, I think, recently. They got a landmark status for it.
So what's stopping the town from putting up those historical things?
I don't know if it's a situation of money. The town of Hempstead puts their own up. They put those little white ones that are there, but the state education department put the blue and white ones.
The big ones.
Those were put up in the 30s, and I think over the years people...
Those are a fucking relic by themselves.
Crash into them, and then they don't put them back. If I ever come into a lot of money, I'll say it on record. If I ever come into a lot of money that I don't need, I'll finance to put them all back up again. Because there needs to be one near Cherrywood. Further down Wantagh Avenue, there's a few that are left, but I think there's something like 6 or 7 of them are missing.
So Cherrywood, that was his estate. There was another hotel where Chase was, right? So
where Chase was actually going back to the 1800s on maps. Chase was it was called the Wantagh Inn Annex, right? It was an annex of the Wantagh Hotel. I said Wanto, and forgive me, Wanto Hotel Annex. That was the annex. That was a restaurant of the Wanto Hotel down by the railroad. That was housed in a 1700s house that was owned by Shepherd Bartholomew, who owned a lot of the property there. That was taken down, I think, in the 60s, and then that mid-century building was put up, and it became Chase. Across the street where the
TD Bank is?
TD Bank was, that was a general store for a long time on the maps on the 1800s, so people would go there and get their stuff. And
my first florist was that next shopping center up, not the Wanto Woods Shopping Center, I think it's called. You have an old picture up of that. There was a grocery store there. I think that was actually King Cullen first.
Yes, that's the Wanto Woods Shopping Center where the Town Bagel is and all that stuff. Yeah.
We could go pay $9 for a bagel.
Good bagels, though.
I know. Still.
Do you have any interesting places you're looking to get into in the near future? Or?
I mean, there's an unlimited number of places on maps. It's just a matter of time and getting
Sure.
the permission to do it. I like the North Fork out east because a lot of it's still farmland. People are still plowing it. They don't care about you digging holes in dirt. So I'll get permission from some of the farms out there.
What is the likelihood of you actually finding something? Not just is it
like when you go, the amount of times you go,
if
you
you
always find something, or
if you do the right research,
trying to schedule a field trip here.
if you want to go, we'll go.
We'll get Jesse to pay for it.
You do the right research, it's almost a guarantee.
Yeah.
If you don't do any
That's cool.
you don't do any research and you just try, you might get lucky, you might waste your time.
We could plan some shit.
that's good to know though. That's good to know. Like, yeah, if you do your research, like, odds are you're gonna find something cool.
The hours are in the research, unfortunately.
Is it?
Yeah.
You do that, and then you just over there.
That might be a business in and of
could do
itself.
it.
You
Yeah.
got it, Frank. I mean, what would be like a dream trip for you to go excavate something on, like unlimited funds, whatever you need.
Wow, that's a good question. I would have loved to be. Could I go back in time, or it has to
Do
be
whatever
now?
you want.
If I could be anywhere in the 1990s when they put the federal building up in Lower Manhattan, they excavated the 5 Points neighborhood. They dug down to build a
Lots of
foundation.
shivs you would have found.
They found, their pottery, their mugs, coins, all that stuff.
all
I
Indian
would've loved
stuff, right?
all the way back to there. Even Lower Manhattan, they were digging. I think it was after the Trade Center came down. They were digging out Ground Zero. They found a ship buried in there.
Yeah, and this is not to sound funny, but like they found like a piece of the plane. I mean, it's not that long ago. In reality, it's like you would think that we would like have located almost all that stuff now. They found a piece of landing gear
Wedged
in
between
like
two buildings.
Yeah,
Did they really?
Yeah.
Wow, I
Like
didn't
a
hear that.
sizable piece,
That's
like a
incredible.
whole tire, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
And it's like you would think like, what does a plane tire weigh? A couple 100 pounds?
Yeah, definitely.
You know,
When they were digging
doing
that
your
up,
dishes and just like, what was that?
I would probably
Somebody's
go
gotta
back
report
there.
that.
That's where I would go.
Yeah?
Points. Yeah, definitely.